Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman Fleming, Ranking Member Huffman, members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the invitation to testify before you today on my legislation, H.R. 5217, the San Luis Drainage Resolution Act, which I introduced to the House of Representatives earlier this year. This bipartisan piece of legislation that is reflected both in my legislation and Congressman Valadale's reflects years of work by this administration and its Department of Interior. I'd like to submit unanimous consent, the letter from Secretary Mike Connor indicating the resolution that the administration came in supporting this bipartisan legislation.
Without objection, so ordered.
It's important to note that this results in a decision made by this administration after the court made a decision in 2000. As a matter of fact, the language of the Westland Settlement Agreement has been in since last fall, and committees, staff have been briefed, member staff have been briefed over the recent months. This is not something new that they've just looked at. The district that I represent in Central California's Valley is home as some of the most productive agricultural land in the world. The San Joaquin Valley, which I and Congressman Valadale call our home, and other representatives, are proud of the crops that we produce that ultimately feed the nation. This is what we're talking about, is food. This settlement agreement is much larger than the issues that we will be discussing here today, because it's food on America's dinner table. It is a national security item. Half the nation's of fresh fruits and vegetables come from California. Number one in the dairy industry, number one in citrus industry, number one in nut production. This is food that goes on all of our constituents' dinner table, period. And that needs to be understood. The San Luis Drainage Act that we will hear today helps ensure the land in the San Luis unit of the Central Valley Project has the opportunity to continue the longstanding history of productivity while saving the federal government nearly $3.8 billion in liability. Secretary Connors, I think, said it best. After the court made the decision in 2000, they had three choices. The three choices were: one, to change the law, which they chose not to do; two, was to reach a settlement agreement, which this legislation reflects and validates; or three, to be found in contempt of court, neither which Mr. Connors nor Secretary Salazar wanted to do. As a matter of fact, this legislation strongly parallels the settlement agreement that was reached, that the NRDC negotiated as part of the San Joaquin River Settlement Agreement. And yes, you can shake your head, but I'd like to enter this as a record to show the parallels of the actions that have taken place on the San Joaquin River Settlement Agreement compared to these agreement that we have here, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Congressman Valadale laid out, I think, the case for the necessity for the drainage settlement for Westland's Water District in his testimony. I have similar thoughts as it relates to the settlement agreement that I am carrying. My legislation authorizes an agreement between three northerly water districts in the San Luis unit, commonly known as the northern districts. That's Panoche, Pacheco, and the San Luis unit. The passage of 5217 would result in a resolution to all of the drainage obligations for the United States and would move the responsibilities of those drainage obligations, and that's where the nexus is, that's where the checks and balances are, to the control of the local jurisdictions. And guess what? If they don't abide by those, they don't get the water, and that's the bottom line. These agreements reached by the Obama administration and the water districts within the San Luis unit need to be authorized to move forward. That's what this hearing's all about. The benefit of the United States are significant. There is no lessening of environmental protections requirements under state or federal law by these agreements. That needs to be underlined as well. But let me just close on this note. Some of my colleagues here and elsewhere have said, look, if Westland's Water District is for something, we're against it, automatically, period. This has been a political football that's been out in California for years. As a matter of fact, some have suggested that the San Luis and farming on the west side ought to dry up and blow away. Dry up and blow away, because that's how much they think of the production of food and fiber. Yes. And let me tell you something, that 100,000 acres that you're concerned about that may be sold, let me explain something to you. If that 100,000 acres doesn't have water, which it doesn't, and if it doesn't have drainage, which it doesn't, listen to me, if it doesn't have water and it doesn't have drainage, guess what? It has no value, period.